The air was heavy with unspoken truths, the kind that linger for decades, shaping careers, destroying friendships, and rewriting history in the shadows. Dame Dash sat forward in his chair during the interview, his voice low at first, deliberate, as though each word carried the weight of years he'd been holding back. He wasn't here to gossip, he made that clear. He was here to tell the truth that had been buried under the polished veneers of record sales, award shows, and media-crafted legends. And at the center of it was DMX, the fire-breathing poet of the streets, a man whose pain and raw honesty had turned him into an icon. Dame's eyes narrowed slightly as he spoke about the early days, the hunger in the air, the unshakable brotherhood that bonded artists together before contracts and egos began slicing through loyalty like a blade. He painted a picture of DMX and Jay-Z in the late 90s, two titans climbing the same mountain, each with their own style, DMX with his unfiltered grit and growl, Jay-Z with his smooth precision and calculated poise. But behind the scenes, Dame hinted, there was tension, competition that wasn't just about skill but about survival in an industry that only allowed one king at the top. Dame's tone sharpened as he described a pivotal moment, a business decision that seemed small at first but changed everything. There was a deal, he claimed, a shift in promotion and label focus, one that tilted the scales away from DMX just as his fire was burning at its brightest. This wasn't just business, Dame said, his voice rising now. This was personal. This was chess. He accused Jay-Z of making moves in meetings that DMX wasn't even in, steering opportunities, securing his own position at the expense of someone who had once been a brother in arms. The words hung in the air like a challenge, daring anyone to deny them. The interviewer leaned in, almost forgetting the cameras, sensing that Dame wasn't just recounting events, he was reliving them. He spoke about tours that never happened, collaborations that were promised but mysteriously shelved, and how the industry began slowly rewriting the narrative, painting DMX as unpredictable, difficult, even self-destructive, while quietly elevating Jay-Z into an untouchable figure. There was no mistaking Dame's frustration, but it wasn't bitterness for his own sake, it was grief for what the culture lost. He talked about DMX as more than an artist, describing him as a truth-teller whose music was a mirror for millions who lived the life he rapped about. They didn't just push him aside, Dame said, his voice tightening, they erased part of hip-hop's soul. He accused the business machine of exploiting DMX's pain while simultaneously weaponizing it against him, turning his struggles into a narrative of failure rather than a testament to his resilience. And while Jay-Z's career soared into unprecedented heights, DMX's path grew darker, weighed down by betrayal, legal battles, and demons the industry had no interest in helping him fight. Dame's eyes glistened for a moment, not with tears, but with the kind of fire that comes from knowing the truth has been locked away too long. The tension in the room was palpable now, the kind that makes even seasoned interviewers forget their next question. Dame leaned back, almost as if he knew the storm his words would cause. You can rewrite the headlines all you want, he said quietly, but you can't change what really happened. The silence after was deafening, the unspoken implication clear. This wasn't just about music or even money. This was about trust, about brotherhood, about the kind of betrayal that doesn't just end a friendship. It changes the course of history. And in that moment, as the cameras kept rolling, Dame Dash made it clear that some stories refuse to stay buried forever. The tension between Dame Dash and Jay-Z has been the stuff of hip-hop legend for years, but in this latest revelation, Dame goes deeper than ever before, laying bare the pain, betrayal, and corporate games that he claims destroyed not only a friendship, but also the career of one of rap's most beloved icons, DMX. Dame speaks with the rawness of someone who lived it, painting vivid scenes from the Roc-A-Fella era where trust was currency, loyalty was sacred, and betrayal hit harder than any diss track. He describes moments in closed-door meetings where decisions were made, not in the name of art or brotherhood, but cold, calculated moves for personal gain. According to Dame, Jay-Z didn't just distance himself from DMX, he positioned himself in a way that undermined the man who once pushed him to greater heights. These claims are layered with insider stories about label politics, power struggles, and the industry machine that chews up even the brightest talents. Dame recalls the early days when DMX, Jay-Z, and himself were all young lions in a cage, battling for recognition but also pushing each other creatively. He paints DMX as a raw force of nature, unfiltered, magnetic, and with a work ethic that matched his hunger. Yet Dame insists that behind the scenes, there was growing friction. The rap world saw the surface, a friendly rivalry, but Dame claims what was happening in private was more sinister. Strategic moves to edge DMX out of certain opportunities, to lock down deals that benefited Jay while leaving X with scraps. It wasn't just about money, it was about legacy, about whose name would be remembered at the top when the dust settled. In one of the most damning parts of his story, Dame suggests that key collaborations were deliberately blocked. He talks about how there were tracks that could have cemented DMX's dominance, but those doors never opened, allegedly because of maneuvering that came from within their own circle. To Dame, this wasn't business as usual, it was a betrayal of the code they all claimed to live by. He says watching this unfold was like watching family turn on each other, all for a seat at the table of an industry that had no loyalty to anyone. Dame's words also carry a personal ache. He admits that DMX was more than just a label mate or artist under the Roc-A-Fella umbrella. He was a brother in arms, someone who brought light and grit into every room. To see him pushed to the margins while others thrived was something Dame could never forget. He recalls conversations where X expressed frustration, feeling like forces within his own camp were holding him back. Dame says those moments haunt him because they were warning signs of the eventual spiral, the isolation that contributed to DMX's later struggles. In the end, Dame's account isn't just an attack on Jay-Z, it's a warning about the music industry as a whole. He frames it as a ruthless game where even the most powerful friendships can't survive when ambition turns into greed. As he lays it all out, you can hear both the bitterness and the mourning in his voice, not just for the friendship lost, but for the career and the life of a man who should have been celebrated until his last day. And whether every detail is exactly as Dame remembers or not, the story adds another shadow to the already complex legacy of hip-hop's golden era, leaving fans to wonder how much of what we celebrated was built on quiet betrayals. The studio air hung heavy as Dame Dash's voice cut through with a rawness that couldn't be faked, his tone somewhere between betrayal and cold certainty. He didn't raise his voice for effect, he didn't need to. The weight of his words made the silence between each sentence louder than any shout could be. He painted a vivid picture of those early years, when the Roc-A-Fella crew was more than just a label. It was a brotherhood built on shared hunger and sleepless nights. DMX wasn't just another rapper to them. He was a force, a magnetic presence whose gravel-toned delivery could send chills down your spine, the kind of artist who lived and breathed every bar. Dame's eyes darkened as he recounted moments when that bond was tested, not by outsiders but from within. There were decisions made in backrooms, contracts slid across tables, deals whispered about in corridors far away from the studio. And in those moments, according to Dame, Jay-Z's ambition started to shift from building with his brothers to building for himself. He spoke of one particular night, the kind that changes everything. DMX was poised for a major push, his energy unmatched, his influence undeniable. But Dame claimed the wheels were already turning against him. Allegedly, while DMX was out there killing shows and feeding the streets the music they craved, Jay was aligning with executives, reworking strategies, subtly pulling support from DMX's corner. Dame's words painted the image of a chessboard where loyalty was replaced with calculated moves, where friendships could be sacrificed if it meant gaining another square on the board. The audience listening to Dame wasn't just hearing gossip. They were feeling the undercurrent of how the industry can twist trust into leverage. And it wasn't just about DMX losing momentum, it was about a culture of betrayal that Dame believed had infected the very core of what they built. The details hit harder as Dame described the shift in their circle. Meetings that once felt like family gatherings turned cold and transactional. DMX's fiery energy, once celebrated, began to be labeled as difficult or unmarketable. Dame recalled a time when labels and executives, guided by whispers from people they trusted, began to question whether investing in DMX was worth the risk. To Dame, it was clear where those whispers were coming from. He stopped short of calling it sabotage outright, but the implication was there, thick in the air like smoke after a fire. Dame spoke not as a bitter ex-partner, but as a man who had seen a blueprint of success rewritten in ways that erased the very people who helped draw it. In one of the most striking moments, Dame leaned forward, his voice low but cutting, and said that what happened to DMX was not just business, it was personal. He believed that removing DMX from certain opportunities wasn't simply about strategy, but about control. Dame suggested that Jay understood DMX's charisma and raw power could never truly be contained, and that made him a threat to the image Jay was crafting for himself. It wasn't about rap beefs or public feuds, it was about reshaping the narrative so that history would remember one king, not a kingdom of them. The more Dame spoke, the more it became clear that this wasn't a single falling out, but the unraveling of a vision they once shared. As Dame's words sank in, the image of DMX standing alone, stripped of the institutional support he once had, burned in the minds of those listening. This wasn't just another tale of music industry politics. It was a cautionary story of how ambition, when left unchecked, can erode the foundations of loyalty. For Dame, this was about more than naming names. It was about holding a mirror to an industry that thrives on forgetting the sacrifices made along the way, and in his telling, Jay-Z's role in DMX's fall wasn't just an unfortunate chapter. It was a deliberate rewrite of history, one Dame was determined to correct before it was too late. The tension between Dame Dash and Jay-Z was never just a simple business falling out. It was an unraveling of trust, loyalty, and brotherhood. As Dame leaned back during the interview, his voice carried that familiar mix of conviction and frustration. "You think this is just about music?" he said, shaking his head. "No, this is about how people change when money and power get involved. And when I saw what was happening to DMX, I couldn't stay quiet." He described a moment few knew about when DMX, already battling his personal demons, found himself sidelined in projects he should have been leading. They were cutting him out of deals, changing the narrative, making it seem like he wasn't reliable, Dame revealed, his eyes narrowing. But the truth? X was still hungry. He still wanted to work. It's just, certain people didn't want him shining brighter than them. The implication was heavy, the silence between his words speaking louder than his voice. It wasn't just about the business maneuvering. Dame painted a picture of a hip-hop battlefield where alliances were formed not out of loyalty, but out of convenience. "There was a time we all had each other's backs," he said. "But I watched Jay make moves behind the scenes that, well, let's just say it wasn't about building each other up anymore. It was about building his own empire, even if that meant stepping on the people who helped him climb." The weight of the accusation hung in the air like thick smoke. Dame's body language betrayed a man who had seen too much, who carried too many memories of backroom deals and whispered conversations that changed careers overnight. When it came to DMX, Dame continued, there were opportunities where Jay could have stepped in, where he could have said, "Nah, this is my brother, let's get him right." But he didn't. And that told me everything I needed to know. Dame's recollections of DMX were bittersweet, memories of the raw energy X brought into every room, of the way his presence commanded respect without trying. "People don't understand," Dame said softly, almost to himself. "X wasn't just an artist. He was a warrior. He was real in a way most people in this business can't even pretend to be. But as the industry shifted, so did the people in it." Dame described instances where DMX would show up, ready to work, only to find his name missing from lineups, his contributions erased from conversations. "And who was benefiting?" Dame asked rhetorically, raising an eyebrow. "Follow the money. Follow the power. You'll find your answer." The interview deepened when Dame spoke about how the industry thrives on isolation. Once they can separate you from your circle, once they make you feel like you've got no allies, that's when they control you, he said. He hinted that Jay-Z understood this strategy well, and that DMX was one of its casualties. It's a shame, because when you look at what DMX accomplished despite everything, you realize he could have gone even further if the people around him had truly been for him. Dame's voice tightened with emotion. But when greed comes into play, the game changes. And the truth is, Jay didn't just let the game change, he played it. By the end, Dame wasn't just telling a story about DMX or Jay-Z, he was issuing a warning about how fame can erode the very bonds that build it. "The industry is like chess," he said, leaning forward. "Every move counts. And when you sacrifice your own to protect your king, you might win the game, but you lose your soul." His words hung heavy, leaving the audience with the image of DMX not just as a fallen star, but as a man caught in a web of power plays and silent betrayals. And for Dame Dash, this wasn't just history, it was a lesson the world needed to hear before more legends were lost in the same way. Under the dim, slow-burn light of this unfolding Hollywood saga, Dame Dash's voice carried a raw edge that made every word feel heavier, like he was peeling back layers of truth that had been deliberately hidden from the public for years. In his telling, this wasn't just about business disputes or personal disagreements, it was about betrayal in its purest form, a kind that leaves scars no amount of time or success can heal. The moment he started describing the tension between Jay-Z and DMX, the air seemed to thicken. He painted a picture of two titans, once bound by mutual respect and the shared grind of building their names from nothing, now caught in a silent war fueled by choices made behind closed doors. Dame spoke slowly, deliberately, about the moments when loyalty should have outweighed ambition, when a friend should have protected rather than capitalized on another's vulnerabilities. The details he hinted at suggested a pattern, a calculated move by Jay-Z to position himself at the top, even if it meant sidelining someone as fiercely talented and beloved as DMX. And though Dame's words carried no theatrical rage, there was a deep ache beneath them, as if he was reliving every conversation, every meeting where the balance shifted and trust began to crumble. The more he unraveled, the more the lines blurred between business strategy and personal betrayal. Dame recalled times when DMX was at his creative peak, commanding stages and capturing hearts, yet somehow being edged out of key opportunities. These weren't accidents, he implied. They were orchestrations, quiet manipulations in boardrooms where DMX wasn't present to defend himself. And behind those moves, Dame suggested, was a vision of dominance that couldn't coexist with DMX's rise. The way he framed it, this wasn't just about removing a competitor, it was about reshaping the narrative of hip-hop history itself. He spoke of moments where collaborations could have changed the game, but instead were buried, left to wither in the vaults of possibility. Each example he gave was like a puzzle piece clicking into place, building an image of a friendship soured by ambition and control. What made his revelation cut even deeper was the humanity he poured into DMX's side of the story. Dame didn't just talk about career moves, he spoke about DMX's battles with inner demons, his resilience, his raw, unpolished brilliance that made him more than just a rapper. He was a voice for those who felt unseen. Dame's voice dipped when he recalled how DMX, in moments of trust, shared his fears and dreams, believing that those close to him had his back. And yet, as Dame told it, that trust was met with decisions that chipped away at his legacy. It was a haunting reflection on how easily loyalty can be traded for power, how friendships forged in struggle can fracture when success distorts the view. Even as Dame's tone remained controlled, there was an undercurrent of frustration. Frustration not just with Jay-Z's alleged actions, but with the industry that allows such moves to go unchecked. He spoke about the machine of fame, how it rewards those willing to play a certain kind of game, often at the expense of integrity. In this world, the line between survival and betrayal is dangerously thin, and Dame seemed determined to make people see that truth. His recounting wasn't for gossip's sake, it was a call to remember the people behind the headlines, to acknowledge the quiet wars that shape careers and legacies. By the time Dame paused, the weight of his words hung in the air like a storm that had yet to break. It was clear that for him this wasn't about stirring up old drama, it was about reclaiming a narrative that had been quietly rewritten. In his eyes, DMX deserved to be remembered not just for his struggles, but for the unshakable impact he made despite them. And if that meant exposing uncomfortable truths about one of the biggest names in music, so be it. Because in Dame's mind, the real tragedy wasn't just what happened to DMX's career. It was that those who could have stood by him chose instead to step over him on their way to the top.